ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the latest.
The IDF says Israeli Air Force jets struck multiple regime command centers and military facilities across the Iranian capital, including ballistic missile arrays, launchers, and air defense systems. Some of the missile launchers were hit while Iranian operators were preparing to fire toward Israel. The strikes also targeted a major compound housing key security agencies of the Iranian regime, including the headquarters of the Revolutionary Guard, the Basik paramilitary force, and the Quds Force. According to the IDF, Iranian intelligence, internal security command, and cyber warfare units were also struck. The military says it's targeting personnel responsible for planning attacks against Israel and for suppressing protests inside Iran. The army says it's dropped about 5,000 bombs on Iran since the war began last Saturday. Israeli strikes have also targeted ballistic missile infrastructure at their launch platforms at a facility in Isfahan. The IDF says more than 300 Iranian missile launchers have been destroyed or disabled so far in the campaign, part of a broader effort to reduce Iran's ability to fire missiles at Israel. A senior Israeli Air Force officer identified only as Colonel Aleph says thousands of Iranian troops have been killed during the bombing waves. He said, "Seconds before I dropped the bombs, I looked left and right and saw dozens of fighter jets beside me, flying freely, dropping hundreds of tons of precise munitions and destroying the targets."
התחלנו חזק ואנחנו ממשיכים חזק. פועלים על פי תוכנית הלחימה הסדורה, בתיאום ובשיתוף פעולה הדוק עם צבא ארצות הברית. יש לנו עוד מטרות ויעדים רבים. בימים הקרובים נתקדם בשלבי המבצע, נעמיק את הפגיעה במערכי המשטר ונמשיך בפירוק יכולותיו, עד להסרת האיומים הקיומיים על מדינת ישראל.
U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth had high praise for the IDF.
Only the United States of America could lead this, only us. But when you add the Israeli Defense Forces, a devastatingly capable force, the combination is sheer destruction for our radical Islamist Iranian adversaries. They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it.
From Tehran to Isfahan, U.S. and Israeli airstrikes continue to target the heart of Iran's military and regime infrastructure.
U.S. Senate Republicans have blocked an effort to rein in President Donald Trump's military campaign against Iran. Lawmakers voted 53-47 against advancing a bipartisan war powers resolution that would have required congressional authorization for any U.S. hostilities against Iran. The measure was backed by Democrats and a small number of Republicans who said it was an attempt to reassert Congress's constitutional power to declare war.
Began with weak leadership from President Carter. It will end with strong leadership from President Trump. This war powers resolution is ill-timed and ill-advised. Congress must stand with the president and our military to finally close, once and for all, this dark chapter of history and pave the way for lasting peace.
The American people will be watching how senators vote. History will judge this chamber for how we act. To my colleagues, all of my colleagues, it is time to make a stand. We must stop another war in the Middle East.
In his latest comments on the conflict, President Trump said the operation in Iran is way ahead of schedule.
I think you probably want to speak about war rather than this, but this is very important. This is very important, and we're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15. And we're going to continue to do well. We have the greatest military in the world by far. And that was a tremendous threat.
The war in the north is intensifying as the IDF continued airstrikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon and deepened its ground incursion into South Lebanon. ILTV's Devil Klein has the latest.
The Israeli Air Force carried out intelligence-based strikes in Beirut, targeting Hezbollah command centers used to plan and direct attacks against Israel. The IDF said the targets included a command facility used by Hezbollah's aerial unit. The strikes came as Iran fired several missiles toward Israel during the night, triggering air raid sirens overnight across the country. The military said some missiles were intercepted while others landed in open areas and no injuries were reported. At the same time, Hezbollah launched drones and rockets toward communities in the Galilee and the Golan Heights. 2 drones heading toward the western Galilee were intercepted by the Iron Dome system. Israeli strikes also hit targets in southern Lebanon and in Beirut's southern suburbs, targeting what the IDF described as Hezbollah terror infrastructure. A strike in Tripoli in northern Lebanon reportedly killed a Hamas operative. New reports suggest Israeli Air Force jets struck Iran and also are hitting targets in Lebanon on their way home from their mission. Senior security officials say the aircrafts carry extra munitions beyond those assigned for Iran. Instead of returning with unused weapons, pilots receive real-time targets in Lebanon from military intelligence and strike a second arena before landing, a dual-theater sortie also used during Operation Rising Lion. The IDF has released new footage showing troops in what it calls forward defensive positions inside southern Lebanon as fighting with Hezbollah continues along the northern front. The military says Israeli forces have pushed deeper into southern Lebanon in recent days to create an additional defensive layer and remove threats to communities in northern Israel. According to the IDF, the 146th Reserve Division is operating in the western sector of southern Lebanon. The 91st Galilee Division is in the east, and the 210th Bashan Division is in the Mount Dov area. The forces include infantry, armored, and combat engineering units.
The Islamic Republic launched several waves of ballistic missiles overnight, this morning and this afternoon. Air raid sirens went off across multiple areas, sending civilians into shelters. Israel's air defense systems intercepted some of the missiles, while others landed in open areas. No injuries were reported. Earlier strikes triggered sirens across Israel, including Tel Aviv, with the IDF confirming interceptions of incoming projectiles. Most missiles were destroyed by Israel's multi-layered air defense systems. At the same time, Hezbollah launched rockets and drones from Lebanon towards northern Israel, with at least 2 drones intercepted over the western Galilee. Since the start of the war, hundreds of missiles and drones have targeted Israel, killing at least 11 and wounding hundreds. The IDF said the rate of Iranian missile launches has declined in recent days, thanks to the IDF destroying more than 300 missile launchers on the ground. Those sporadic salvos continue. As the war rages on and Islamic Republic targets continue to be taken out by the U.S. and Israeli forces, joining us now to discuss the ongoing operations and the next steps is Len Khodorkovsky. Len, it's great to see you as always. Just to start, I'd love to hear your perspective on the sentiment in the U.S. about this campaign. I mean, we hear a lot of talk about strong opposition to President Trump's actions amongst the American public on the left and even some of the right. How prevalent is that opposition?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you today, even though it's wartime. I think as far as the support goes, support is fickle. There's a saying that victory has 1,000 fathers and defeat is an orphan. I think this is going to be the case here as well. There is some concern, some anxiety, but remember, before the Second World War, only 8% of the American public supported America going into the war. But by the end of the war, in 1945, the support was 98%. So I think we have to be very, very careful in terms of paying too much attention on the daily back and forth in terms of polling and focus on the job at hand. And I think the context of why we're even talking about this issue is that the Islamic Republic has been at war with the United States since its founding in 1979. So it's not like we woke up and went to war with the regime. The regime has killed thousands of Americans over the last 47 years, including 46 Americans on October 7th. It's even tried to assassinate President Trump himself. So, it shouldn't be a surprise that after 47 years, a president who's resolute on protecting the American public has decided to do something about this pernicious threat of nearly half a century.
Now, do you think that the American public truly understands the threat to Americans from this regime? I mean, you spoke a bit about it, but how grave and how imminent is that threat had the president not decided to act right now?
Well, I actually heard Steve Witkoff talk about it yesterday. He was on an American show, and he was walking through in extraordinary detail the negotiations process with the regime leading up to the strike. And, you know, I hope everybody finds that clip on the web, because what he detailed was that the regime's opening salvo in the negotiations was a boastful declaration that they have enough uranium for 11 nuclear weapons today, not you know, in distant past, not some distant threat, but if they decided to sprint to 11 nuclear weapons, it was just a matter of weeks before they could do it. So that certainly makes it an imminent threat. Second, Steve Witkoff actually detailed how he and Jared Kushner caught the regime lying multiple times, even during the 3 rounds of negotiations. Now, again, that shouldn't surprise anyone because the regime has been lying all along, and we only suspended disbelief through the JCPOA. And at the end of the day, look, I believe in the American public. I think, you know, the American people are smart. They instinctively know that the regime is a threat. Even the polling that is suggesting some anxiety in the American public about what's going on, I think that's natural. There's wartime. Missiles are flying. You know, our servicemen are in danger. It's natural that people are anxious. But I think the evidence is plainly available that unless someone did something about this, you know, foremost sponsor of terrorism in the world, that it was just a matter of time before the worst case scenario would have been the one that we were dealing with. And you know what? President Trump deserves a ton of credit for finally making a very courageous, bold decision to stop the talking and act. And he acted in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, and he acted now in Operation Epic Fury. And he is the first one to act, and he deserves all the credit in the world. And you know what? I trust the American military. I trust the Israeli military and our combined capabilities to put an end to this nightmare.
Now, I know that you are close with the team of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, the only opposition leader in the eyes of most Iranians. But President Trump seems to be on the fence a little bit about him. Why is the Crown Prince the right choice for a transition leadership, and how can he prevent chaos from erupting internally post this Islamic regime?
Well, look, I try and put myself in the shoes of a decision maker, like the president of the United States in the middle of a very combustible situation. And, you know, having worked for President Trump, I think I have a little bit of an insight as to how he comes to a decision. And, you know, he likes optionality. He likes to hear from a lot of people, different perspectives. You know, and he's certainly doing that. He's hearing from people who are anxious about this action and who may be even against this action. He's hearing from people who understand the threat that comes from this regime to the United States and our friends. And he's talking to a wide range of people, both in the U.S. and his cabinet, in the region, certainly to leaders in Israel. And I think, you know, as a guy who's been doing deals for his entire grown-up life, I think he understands that he wants to be positioned for maximum success. And I think, you know, if I were trying to paint a picture of what comes next, the reason I support the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is because I see what is plain to see, which is he is the only person who has significant support inside of Iran and outside of Iran. During the January uprising that they're calling the Lion and Sun Revolution, when 40,000 or so, or maybe even more, Iranians were slaughtered, the only name that they were chanting as the bullets were flying at them was his name. That is unmistakable. I did not hear any other name. I did not see any other name on graffitied on walls. I didn't see any other pictures that are being displayed, not inside the country, not outside the country. So I think we have to look at the evidence and say, there is no evidence, no credible evidence that anyone other than the prince has support of the Iranian people. Now, the good news is that he is aligned with American objectives of this action. And I think he is positioned to deliver what President Trump is looking for in what comes next. I think that transition that he is committed to is a democratic transition. He said himself he's a transitional figure, that he has certainly, as I mentioned, the support of the Iranian people. I believe he's unifying the opposition to the extent that people could be unified on multiple pillars, democratic pillars that he's laid out. I can go into those like territorial integrity, like equal rights under the law, and so on. And so, people are gravitating to that. And one more important point, Emily, that I want to mention, which I think is important to President Trump. If he's looking for a stable transition, he's not looking for chaos. He certainly knows the history of what happens as a result of warfare in the region. And what he needs to understand is that Iran is not Iraq, Iran is not Libya, and Iran is not Syria. I think what he has here is a population that's greatly united and extremely sophisticated. And what they're looking for is someone to get behind. And I think the prince is that guy, and he will deliver the stable, credible transition to eventually to an election where people will choose themselves who they want.
All right. Well, we do have to end it at that. Unfortunately, we're out of time, although we could keep talking about this, I think, for quite some time. I want to thank you for joining us today, Len Khodorkovsky.
Thank you.
Well, as war continues across Israel, thousands of elderly, disabled, and vulnerable Israelis are trapped in shelters without access to food. Thankfully, Yad Ezra Shulamit is caring for them, delivering emergency food packages to the homes of the needy and shelters across the country. They're already reaching thousands, making sure people waiting in bomb shelters have plenty of food to eat. Each meal they give sends a powerful message: you are not alone. And right now, you can join them in this important mission to feed Israel's most vulnerable. Scan the QR code on your screen to help deliver food under fire today. Conflicting reports surfaced last night suggesting Iranian Kurds were planning an offensive to fight against the Islamic Republic. This came after reports mistakenly claimed Iraqi Kurds were carrying out an invasion of Iran's western border. Washington has denied approving any insurgency plan, and the Kurdish factions also denied the reports.
As the war in Iran intensifies, disinformation and the fog of war are making it near impossible to fully understand the situation. Last night, reports surfaced falsely claiming that pro-American Kurdish militia groups in Iraq are preparing units to cross into Iran, with some sources even claiming Israeli and U.S. support for the action. But within hours, most sources walked back the claim, noting that only Iranian Kurds had been involved in discussions related to the matter. The claim was also denied by Kurdish factions in Iraq and Iran, as well as the Islamic Republic and the White House. Sources familiar with the matter say the CIA had previously provided small arms to Iranian Kurdish groups as part of a long-running covert effort to destabilize the regime, a program that began years before the current war. But the White House has made no indication that such a plan is taking place now, or that the president has approved any plan for a Kurdish insurgency. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said reports that Washington has greenlit such an operation are completely false. In response to the claims the Islamic Republic claimed they would launch a military campaign against Kurds in Iraq to suppress factions seeking to divide Iran, prompting suspicions that the regime had leaked the claims in the first place as a pretense for attacking Kurds, something they have a long history of. Amongst Iranians, including Iranian Kurds, the claims the U.S. and Israel were aiding a foreign separatist group were met with fury, as territorial integrity is a core national value for Iranians, including the majority of Iranian Kurds. At the same time, airstrikes in western Iran in recent days, including attacks on IRGC facilities, police posts, and border guard bases, have damaged key locations along routes from Iraq into Iran, though there's no evidence of an incursion or a planned incursion. For now, the story remains unclear, but if such action occurs, it would damage the Iranian people's trust in both the U.S. and Israel, whose bombing campaigns they have widely supported up until now.
Israel is beginning to ease some civilian restrictions as the rate of Iranian missile fire declines. The IDF Homefront Command says that starting at noon today, the country moved from essential activity to a level of limited activity under the new guidelines. Gatherings of up to 50 people will be permitted, provided a protected shelter can be reached in time. Workplaces will also be allowed to operate under the same conditions. Schools, however, will remain closed, and beaches will stay off limits to the public. The changes come after a U.S. military assessment said that Iran's rate of missile fire against Israel and other countries has dropped by about 86% since the start of the war. The restrictions were first imposed last Saturday when the conflict began, with officials warning of a full shutdown of much of the economy that could cost Israel billions of shekels every week. The new guidelines will remain in place until at least Saturday night, when the Homefront Command will conduct another security assessment. Israel has just launched a large-scale rescue flight operation to bring home tens of thousands of Israelis stranded abroad after its airspace closed after the outbreak of the war. The first flights are now underway, with Israeli airlines operating dozens of arrivals into Ben Gurion Airport. Transportation Minister Miri Regev announced Israel will open its airspace for outgoing flights starting Sunday, subject to the security reality, and promised continuous updates. On the flight operations plan, our reporter India Naftali, who is among those waiting to return to Israel. India, what can you tell us?
That's right, Emily. I'm currently in the United States, and like many Israelis, I've been waiting for a way back home since all incoming flights were canceled. Now, the rescue operation has begun, and I'm expected to be on one of those flights returning to Israel.
The first phase of the operation will begin with a limited number of flights. During the first 24 hours, one passenger aircraft an hour with about 200 people aboard will be permitted. After those initial 24 hours, the frequency will be increased to 2 narrow-body aircrafts an hour, or alternatively 1 wide-body aircraft, all subject to approval by the Homefront Command and security authorities. Around 10,000 passengers a day are expected to arrive at Ben Gurion Airport as of this coming Friday. For now, only inbound flights have been approved. Israel's main airlines, El Al, Arkia, Israel, and Air Haifa are all taking part in the rescue effort.
הכי כיף. זה כיף לחזור. וחייבות להגיד שבאמת כאילו המעייפים וכל זה הדרות הסביבות ממש חמודים כדרך. וזה נורא להרגיש בנוח.
El Al, Israel's national airline, says it will prioritize passengers whose flights were canceled, with rescue flights operating from about 22 destinations across Europe, the United States, and Asia. Humanitarian cases are also expected to receive priority, with about 10% of seats reserved for passengers in urgent situations.
All right, let's take a look at Day 6 of the war in Iran. The Air Force carried out a new wave of airstrikes overnight and today, hitting targets in Tehran and in western